Mr. Mosquito. Most likely, you haven't heard of this game before. It's rather rare to find a game such as this back then. But, if you know about it, you either played it before or you've seen videos such as these. For me though, I did manage to grow up playing this game before. It was rather interesting to play weird Japanese video games such as these, along with Katamari Damacy and The Incredible Crisis. But I've been wondering, how exactly is it that good or weird it can be? I've done a new game plus completion of the game, just to get a good grasp of it for this review. And honestly, it's not that easy. Especially when you get to the harder part of the game, I end up getting stressed a lot from it. This is K1PM. Today, I'll be doing a full review of Mr. Mosquito. I'll be talking more in depth about the game and pointing out the pros and the cons of it. The game was developed by Zoom Inc., a Japanese game company that didn't quite do well from their other games. Mr. Mosquito, on the other hand, had a moderate success on its release on the PS2. Both the game itself and the amount of sales it made before in Japan. It received some praises for its weird quirkiness of the game, playing as a mosquito and sucking out the blood of its victims around the house. Whether it'll be on the Japanese room, yes, that's what it's called, for some reason, kitchen stage while the mother is preparing a meal, or even at the bathroom while a girl is taking a bath. It's kinda crazy how they end up making games like this. Good old Japanese game ingenuity, am I right? Now, before I move on, I wanted to start right from the very beginning of the game, since it's actually an important thing to talk about.
Welcome to the home of the Yamada family. It's summer. Do you like summer? Summer drives people crazy, and that makes them commit terrible acts.
I'm not sure if this is a documentary or a game that I should be playing. These scenes actually gets even worse all throughout the cutscenes of the game. Taking most of the dialogue scenarios are like these. Not only where the shots looks really bad, but how awkward the translated dialogues can be.
Rena, it's time for your bath.
I'm in the middle of watching something cool on TV. I'll take it later.
Do you mind if your father gets in before you?
Be right there.
Reina. Itchy.
At which part is it itchy? Is it over here? Huh? That's the look of a relief man over here. After he does his thing, if you know what I mean. Yup, this is how the game actually goes. Oh boy. You know, they should have taken notes on what Incredible Crisis have done with their own story. Creating a bunch of interestingly weird scenarios for the game, unlike what they did over here. Come on. It kind of feels like a wasted potential on what they could have done here. They put in a lot of effort on the ending. Why can't it be the same thing on the other cutscenes? To be fair, there's some decent ones around, but it just feels too short compared to how long these sections plays out. It just feels lazy to the developer's part. I understand that it's a budget title as it is, but they could have at least put a lot more effort than these ones. Luckily, you can just skip them, I guess. The gameplay, on the other hand, is the main attraction. You get to play as a mosquito and basically suck the blood of every household within the family, including the daughter's friend. But it can only be done through specific spots of the body and the right timing with their position at, which can be challenging at the same time a bit tedious in a way. The game doesn't let you exploit one part of the body. I guess that's their own way of adding the challenge, I guess. Oh well. The controls of the game, however, can be really hard to get used to. It's kinda like getting used to the controls of Ape Escape, but on a much more heavier on the movements. It takes a lot of retries just to get used to it. It's reasonable, that I could say, but it's not easy, that's for sure. Especially how heavy the amount of motion blur and slow motion being applied throughout the game. They kinda went overkill at that point. I know motion blur was a thing before, but this is kinda too much. Even back then as a kid, I couldn't handle that shit for long. I had to take small breaks in between just to get back at it. Although, what I do like the most is the blood-sucking part of the game. It's actually a simple premise where I could control the amount of blood I store based on how fast the right analog I spin, while being careful on the blue meter that goes up or down at times. Depending on the stage's difficulty, it can be a struggle to do. I'm not quite sure why I find this fascinating, either because of the smooth controls of pumping that blood from the body, or because of that boob thing. Probably both. Just be careful not to get too excited from draining their blood. You'd most likely get a slap from it. Good thing there's a meter here down below. Jokes aside, if the player gets caught for that long, the game ends up initiating a battle sequence. The human ends up trying to eliminate the player for good. The only way to get out from this is by hitting the relax points around the body. And when I say relax points, I mean these points. Yup, as if the boob shots weren't enough. Good old Japanese games after all. The game has a total of 12 stages. It gets harder as you progress throughout it all. They'd end up using mosquito coils, bug zappers, and even bug sprays just to get rid of you. On harder stages, every object is covered with bug sprays, making any object you land or touch on gets you a zapping sensation. Although the last 3 boss stages can be really unfair. Stage 9 becomes too glitchy that ends up making the boss harder to hit. Stage 10 starts out with a high chance of killing me at the start. Then there's stage 11, where... The game basically just give this man some cheat codes just to beat me up. It basically hit me throughout everywhere of the stage, no matter where I try to hide. I just have to rely on pure luck to avoid any of his attacks, while constantly getting some hearts to restore my HP along the way. Most players at this point ends up dropping the game, which I don't blame them honestly. The last stage, however, is a much more relaxing end. I could freely drain the blood out of them while they're still unconscious, but it's really hard to get that extra tank filled up. There's still a high chance of getting a slap when draining them too much. There's a ton of things to collect throughout the game, which should be fine, but on this game's case can be a nightmare to look out for. Considering the wide spaces I could fly around the stages, searching an item can be a real pain, especially how small it is that you gotta look out for, especially during at the boss stages. Not only would I have to watch out for the boss, but how I need to find the other items in a very dark room. Like, what the heck, game? This isn't how you do level designing of a game. The game also offers a few more unlockables on the side, extra skins to unlock, or play as a weird mosquitonoid human-like skin. It's weird and gross at the same time. Like, why, game? After collecting every X-Tanks available on every stages that I filled with the blood of my victims, the game actually offers a new game plus, having the same kind of stages, but with a much more harder difficulty to play, as well as having a new sets of dialogues for the game, which is actually a plus. That is, if the dialogues were that good from the start, which at this point, I don't want to play the game any further if I'd be honest. But for the sake of this video and out of my curiosity, alright then. At this point, I end up wondering how I end up enjoying this game as a kid before. Oh wait, now I remember why. The game actually became known outside of Japan for this reason. Especially how a ton of different YouTubers ends up playing the game for this part. Which, I don't blame them. I understand why. One of the things that were left forgotten by many to talk about is the secret hidden multiplayer mode for the game. Me and my brother accidentally discovered this back then, when we were practicing on how to spin that right analog that fast before. Rotating the right analog stick for about 20 times on the title screen ends up going through this part of the game. It's a simple minigame where you toss your opponent towards the edge of the platform. It's nothing that special, I guess. But, developers, if you guys have the time in creating a minigame like this, why the heck didn't you guys improve the main game itself instead? Especially the tons of problems I found in the game. Like, come on. When it comes to the art style, however, it's kinda meh if I'd be honest with you. The 3D models of each character are a bit bland for its time as a PS2 game. But what I hate the most is how stiff the animations can be throughout the whole game. If the game tries to aim for a more real-life kind of scenario, why not let them act a bit more natural in a way, and not an obvious repetitive robotic pattern that a player could exploit on? Incredible Crisis have done an absolute better job as compared to this game, and that game was released years ago on the PS1. Heck, even Ape Escape Games has done a better job at it. Although to be fair, I actually like the subtle changes on what they did on the new game plus. Some of the images and textures of the game actually changes, but that's just it however. The rest of it is just a bit disappointing if I'd be honest. Now, when it comes to the soundtrack of the game however, it's basically just a bunch of good elevator music, a soothing jazzy theme, and an alright battle theme. It's not that bad actually, but something just seems lacking for some reason while listening to it. You know, I'm guessing the game could have used a better direction for the game in order to fit that music well. That's why I give this game a rating of 6.5 out of 10. Despite its appeal towards a unique kind of gameplay, the game itself lacks a lot of things on the side that ends up leaving a ton of problems along the way. It certainly was a unique experience, especially for its time on the PS2. You don't get a lot of these kinds of games before, mechanic-wise I mean. Not the weird stuff, we already got a lot of them. But it's not like I end up enjoying it all throughout, especially how frustrating the bosses can be in the game. The developers could have done a better job at it, but instead, they kinda messed it up overall. The only positive thing that I could see here is the gimmick of playing as a Mosquito, and that's it, unfortunately. Now, would I recommend you on playing the game? I suggest just look the other way on this one. Despite being as a childhood game of mine, the confusing controls, awful motion blur setup, and unfair boss fight what kinda ruins it for me on my experience. Although, the next two weird Japanese video games that I'm currently working on for my review, that's the thing that you could look out for that you might enjoy. Hopefully. I wish. Hopefully you'd stay for more. For more videos such as these, why not head down to my channel to check things out? I do accurate game reviews of the past games, and some other new ones too. If you want to support my channel, a subscribe would be nice. It kinda helps me out morally, to be honest. This is K1PM, and I bid you farewell.